Venessa. One of my favorite characters of all time in Genshin Impact. Venessa is one of the most mysterious and enigmatic characters that the Genshin Impact lore makes note of. From stories told in books, and from characters who mention her, such as Venti and Jean, Venessa is one of Mondstadt's heroes, most notably known for abolishing the aristocracy and founding the Knights of Favonius, and also for being one of the only two people who ever ascended to the heavens. But we'll go more in depth on that later. Today, we go over Venessa's life and the mystery around her whole enigma. But first, before we begin though, if you enjoy Tevod's Facts and Wisdom, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. After the video is over, join us over in our community Discord server, where we talk all about Genshin, including lore. Okay, with that said, let's open the Tevotctionary and see what's been uncovered. Before we dive deeper into the details, let's learn more about Venessa, her origins, and what she was like as a person. In the first few pages of the manga, we are met with Venessa and her little sister, Linda, staying indoors in a humble little cottage which seemed to be stripped of any furniture, except for a small bed in which Linda was laying. Venessa, who lived most of her human life in Mondstadt as a gladiator, was paying her little sister a visit, who was sleeping at the time. Upon leaving the little home, Venessa bows down the Celestia, which was visible in the night sky, in an almost ritualistic way, as to imply it was part of a routine. Kneel in penitence and offer a silent prayer. From her actions, we can already tell Venessa has a kind heart, caring for others and especially her sister, which is reiterated by characters in-game, such as directly by Jean and indirectly by Venti. As in, he doesn't outright make mention of her name, but it's safe to assume he was talking about her. On the opposite side of her personality, we also know that Venessa was a hardened fighter, a flame-touched Maratan, an expression which also means to highlight her origins from Natlan, the region ruled over by Marata, the god of war. As such, she was also described to have a Maratan temper by Venti, which we can just assume means she had a short and volatile fuse. The generations before her wandered through the lands, and most of the information passed down was about the survival and combat techniques rather than history. As such, there is no information about who the predecessors in her family were and what it was they did. The only things passed down, aside for survival skills, were several stories about the heavenly abode. She was often told as a child that only heroes who achieved great things would be invited into the paradisiacal home of the gods to protect the world alongside them. While wandering the wilderness, Venessa and her clan were stalked and starved by a draconic creature named Ursa the Drake, which ultimately forced them to seek shelter in Mondstadt. Hoping to be met warmly with shelter and food, Venessa was instead enslaved by rich nobles and became a gladiator for the nobles' entertainment in order to help her people be free again. Over time, she earned a reputation as an undefeated gladiator with no opponent to hope to strike her down, which gained her the title of Lion Fang Knight. Venessa makes her first contact with Venti on the day of the Ludi Harpastum, a most famous Mondstadt festival for boys and girls, known for having 15 days of games and joy. At the end of the game, the crowd chooses a maiden who then throws a harpastum into the crowd, and the one who picks the harpastum will receive a year's worth of good fortune. Upon the maiden throwing the harpastum into the crowd, it lands closest to Venti and the spoiled son of Lord Lawrence. Venti is first to pick it up, which obviously greatly upsets the son of royalty, who in response shouts foully at Venti and unleashes his rapier in hostility. The bard makes a run for it, but soon bumps into what felt like a stone wall, but instead proves to be Venessa, who is making her way home with the bag of herbs for her sister. Scared, the ignorant child orders for the slave to step aside, but he is only met with silence and a death stare. In the end, the child backs off, but doesn't leave without threatening Venessa, telling her, "You'll be sorry." Later that night, Barca, the spoiled son, finds Venessa and tells her that his father bought her, and that she belongs to their clan now. Consequently, Venessa is imprisoned and awaits a decisive duel the following day. That same night, Venti makes an appearance in her cell, humming a ballad. The bard introduces himself and his lyre to Venessa. She, in return, also introduces herself and talks about her past, her ways of living, and the recent travels and events of her tribe. Venessa, at one point, makes mention of Celestia and the stories she had heard from her kin. She then makes a request to Venti to tell her more about the heavenly abode in hopes of hearing something about it. But Venti quickly and oddly changes the topic to something else. Later in the friendly exchange between the two, Venti offers to free Venessa of her shackles, spare her from her fights she has to take place in the following day, and break her out of the cold prison she was placed into. She turns down the offer, saying that we must fight and claim our own freedom. We cannot beg for it, we must not kneel for it. Freedom given freely is only a guise for another shackle. Venti leaves Venessa alone, allowing her to fight for her own freedom as per wish. The next day, after being escorted to the Colosseum, she is surprised to see her kin in the same arena as her, and becomes even more surprised to hear that their opponent will be the very monster who starved her clan for 4 days and forced them to seek shelter in Mondstadt. Lord Lawrence promises Venessa and her people freedom, as well as the keys to the gates of the city. The corrupt lord makes these promises, fully expecting Venessa to not be able to defeat her formidable opponent. Venessa charges at the draconic monster while the rest of her clan rush towards the exit of the arena, only to be met with a shower of arrows from the archers guarding the gates from above. In the end, Barbados makes an appearance and exorcises the monster away from the arena, assuring Venessa's victory, saying, "You fought bravely for the freedom of your people, so allow me to fight for your freedom as well." Before leaving, he reminds Lord Lawrence of the promise he made to Venessa and her people before the start of the fight to make sure he holds up his end of the deal. Faced directly with a god, Lawrence had no choice but to comply. Thus, order is restored in the city of Mondstadt and the aristocracy is abolished. Venessa goes on to establish the Knights of Favonius with the role of fighting against any others who attempt to bring back an aristocracy. She becomes the first Grand Master as well as the Dandelion Knight in the Knights of Favonius. We do not know exactly how long Venessa lived in her human form or the exact time when she ascended to Celestia. We only know that she left behind a prosperous city who earned its own freedom, and its people continued to work for maintaining the freedom that their first Grand Master and Dandelion Knight bestowed upon them. A legend in Mondstadt claims that Venessa ascended to Celestia where the 1,000-year-old tree at Windrise currently stands proud and tall. The procedure of ascending to Celestia is that much more mysterious, and we can only speculate about what may be going on behind the scenes as far as that goes. In the manga, we see Venessa ascend while Venti sings a little song he wrote about his dear friend, who also asks, "Does entering Celestia make you a god?" Venti also talks about the sacrifice in order to give birth to the world made by Pangu, a creation figure in Chinese mythology who separated heaven and earth and became the mountains, seas, and rivers, Purusha, a figure in dualistic Indian philosophy who sacrificed itself for the creation of man and woman, and Ymir, the giant in Norse mythology who threw her brain up into the skies to create the clouds. Their sacrifices nurtured human life in a barren cosmos. As Venti talks about these creation figures, Venessa goes through the process of ascending to Celestia and ultimately turning into a falcon and one of the four winds. And that wraps up most of Venessa's legacy. But we're not just done yet. There are still a few more things which are worth pointing out. Most important is a scene before Venessa's ascension when she asks Venti to tell her something about Celestia, to which Venti in response avoids the question and changes the topic. The three hooded figures, which seem to instill fear towards Venti, may hold more symbolism and meaning than we think. We also have to keep in mind the significance of the number 3 and its recurrence in Genshin Impact, as well as throughout many cultures and mythology, and most notably in fairy tales across the globe. Fairy tales from a multitude of folklores begin using what are known as magic numbers, such as 3 and 7, which is an element specific to these writings. For example, 3 fairy godmothers in The Sleeping Beauty, 7 dwarfs in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, 3 little pigs in the 3 Little Pigs, 3 wishes in the 3 Wishes stories, 7 mermaids in the Little Mermaids, and more to mention. Genshin relates to such examples with 3 moon maidens, 7 archons, 3 hooded figures, 3 creation figures mentioned by Venti, etc. On the topic of the 3 hooded figures, which Venti had a small flashback to upon Venessa asking about Celestia, one may not think beyond these three hooded figures as more than simply some upper echelons in Celestia's hierarchy, which is not wrong by any means in my opinion, but I believe their symbolism goes a little bit deeper than that. Genie Cucullati, or the three-hooded spirits, a triptych, a triadic notion found mostly in Old Britannia, are thought to have been part of the symbolic imagery of the sacred beings of the Doe Bunny tribe. They are very ambiguous, mostly thought to be male, but some seem to be female. They occasionally carry what looks like eggs, a fertility sign. It is as if they are household gods. They must bring to the household, to the people of the tribe, good things they must heal, provide good crops, and be beneficial in their gifts. This is not a Christian god demanding obedience to the one and only, who threatened with damnation in hell. These gods have a somewhat kinder face. A Cucullati is a hood fastened to a cloak. This is what makes them so mysterious. They have been named in the epigraphy in Austria as Genio Culato, to the hooded genius. In some other parts of Austrian culture, they are also a symbol of death and fear, something which felt like it was being instilled when Venti was having some sort of flashback of them. Their origins in symbolism differ from area to area, and these notions remain a mystery to archaeologists even today. In the game, however, I believe these three-hooded figures to be a mixture of the two possible meanings. I believe they play a role in ensuring a land capable of sustaining human life, but I also believe that they play a role in making sure the Archons respect the contracts they have made with Celestia. It is probably thanks to these hooded figures that the Archons are unable of talking about Celestia, let alone disclosing information about what their contract is, or how Celestia actually works. It is also very important to note that they are not in the highest ranking in power, but they do seem to hold an authority greater than that of the Archons. Moving on to the most relevant symbol that the manga depicts in its final pages of the prologue, we have Venessa, the way in which Venti refers to Venessa, as well as Venessa's transformation into an immortal falcon and her affiliation with the Four Winds. While Venti was singing about his dear friend Venessa, I couldn't help but notice how Venti referred to Venessa as Venessa. And this clearly is not for the sake of rhyming or the musicality of his ballad, for he instead made an exception of saying Celeste instead of Celestia to make that rhyme with Venessa. Venessa is a surname derived from the German words Vogel, meaning bird, and Sang, meaning song, which pretty much translates to bird song. Considering that Venti sings this song while Venessa ascends and goes through the process of becoming a falcon, it is safe to assume that Venti was foreshadowing these series of events, implying that Venti knew Venessa was going to ascend to Celestia and turn into a falcon. However, I'm not very sure as to how big of a role Celestia played in this scenario. By this, I mean that I do not believe it was Celestia alone who decided to allow Venessa to ascend, especially given the fact that upon turning into a falcon, she became one of the Four Winds. It feels as if Venti had this part in making these decisions. Given all of this, I also believe that while Venessa has indeed achieved and fulfilled her greatest wish since childhood, that of having the opportunity to visit the home of the gods and protect the world alongside them, she remains oblivious and ignorant to what goes on in Celestia as well as its history, which is a mystery to everyone but the Archons and whoever else is in charge of running the heavenly abode. The clear reason for this is Venessa's extreme sense of righteousness and freedom. Should she have become aware of all of Celestia's history, she probably would have been opposed to ascending and being granted immortality. This would also explain why Venti looks kind of regretful before Venessa's ascension. We know that Celestia became an extremely controversial figure in the world after the Cataclysm 500 years ago, but we don't know if it was just as controversial, mysterious, and suspicious more than 500 years ago. However, the small details of the three-hooded figures and Venti's almost regretful expression before Venessa's ascension may tell us something wasn't right back then either. Moving on to another relevant aspect in regards to Venessa's ascension, we have her transformation into a falcon. Why a falcon, you might ask? Why not an eagle, a dove, or a mockingbird? perhaps we will understand the reason better by looking into what a falcon symbolizes in different parts of the world. The symbolism of a falcon is a fairly contradictory one, because in some cultures, they may represent the opposite of what they do in others, for it can mean death or evil, or the sun and vitality. In Native American symbolism, the falcon is a sign of power, courage, protection, and strength. A bird who is sheltering the people from rivals and the ill-intended. In Eastern cultures, the falcon is a symbol of fortune and good luck. In Celtic culture, the falcon represents a person who possesses great wisdom and intuition. Celtic folklore speaks of the peregrine falcon symbolism as an omen to being careful and keeping your eyes open to possible dangers. In African culture, more specifically Egyptian, the falcon is viewed as a protector of the sky and the king, and is also used to depict the most critical deity they had, Horus, the god of justice. On the opposite end of the spectrum, however, in Christianity, the falcon is viewed as unclean and evil, a bird who preys on others and should never be eaten. Christian scriptures go as far as to call them an abomination. The falcon searches far and wide for the truth and the ultimate wisdom, and yet, despite their superior eyesight, they are not capable of finding all that is hidden. The spiritual meaning of falcon also appears as a personal transformation by denying your old self and becoming a better person or converting to Christianity. Now, to give a quick synopsis of all of this, as well as my take on the symbolism of the falcon in Vanessa's Ascension, the falcon overall is a bird which brings good fortune and assures the safety of its people. However, it also may be a merciless hunter, a symbol of evil with Luciferic characteristics, such as the strong desire to learn the truths of the world. In the Genshin Impact universe, I believe it holds meaning gathered from various cultures and not just one. Venessa continues to guard over Mondstadt and assures its safety. It's a protector of its people and drives away rivals and the ill-intended. She always keeps her eyes open for any danger that may lurk around, and Mondstadt has certainly found good fortune in its protector, even long before it soared through the skies by overruling the aristocracy. However, I firmly believe Venessa is still oblivious to the very likely grim truths behind the golden, pure, and heavenly facade of Celestia. She gained knowledge and wisdom by confirming for herself that the stories she had heard were true. That those who ascend the Celestia are bestowed the honor of protecting the world among the other gods and becoming sort of a god herself. But she didn't learn everything there was to learn, despite stepping into the heavenly abode, which contains every truth about the world. Well, that wraps up the mysterious Venessa. What did you guys think? Pretty interesting, huh? I love all the symbolism that this game has to offer, and the idea of falcon symbolism really plays a part in why Venessa ascended to that form. What do you guys think though? Let me know down below, as well as let me know if you're hyped for Hu Tao. I will be doing a video about her sometime soon, so be prepared for that. With that said though, I'm gonna wrap this up. Thanks for opening the Teyvattionary, and I will see you in the future for more Genshin Impact content and lore.